Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining from, or if you're watching the replay. And welcome to the fourth edition of our ZTNA Table Talk series. I'm Ixta Gerard, and I'm glad to have you with us today in this ongoing conversation about Zero Trust Network Access. Each month, we dive into key challenges, emerging trends, and best practices for securing modern enterprises. Before we dive in, a few quick housekeeping notes to keep in mind. This session is being recorded and you'll receive the replay within 24 hours. We encourage you to drop your questions in the Q&A panel and we'll address as many as we can during the live session. If we run out of time, don't worry, our team will follow up with you with answers after the session. Now let's jump into today's session, a practical blueprint for zero trust, best of breed strategies for end-to-end security. We have an insightful discussion ahead with our distinguished speakers presenting today, Venki Raju, Field CTO of Kohler Tokens, and Peter Gallagher, Solutions Architect here at AppGate. So let's get started. Peter, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much. So my name is Peter Gallagher. I'm a Solutions Architect here at AppGate. And little run through of what we're going to be doing today for you is we're first going to talk a little bit about our individual organizations, about kind of where we are in the market and what we do. Then we're going to introduce some of the demo scenarios, and we're going to run through all those demo scenarios. And then at the very end, we're actually going to show a live demo. And if there are any questions that come up throughout the webinar, feel free to put them in the Q&A or make a comment somewhere, and we will do our best. We're going to hold some time at the end to get to them. So without further ado, AppGate has a product, AppGate SDP, software-defined perimeter. And what it is a zero trust network access solution. And it's very unique. It's kind of like what a VPN on steroids would be, where it combines the ability to provide remote access, but also with very robust and layered security. In fact, it is a continuous authorization in order to access resources. And we do this by combining identity and device metrics. And we bring this all together to make sure that the right people have access to the right things at the right time. Venki?
Thanks so much, Peter, and it's great to be here. So a little bit about Color Tokens and what we do. So we are what we call ourselves a breach-ready platform. We do it through microsegmentation. And I'm sure as soon as I said microsegmentation, you're probably reaching for your 10-foot pole. But and there's a reason why it is considered challenging. But what we've attempted to do is introduce a better practice than what conventional microsegmentation tools have tended to do, right? Which is application ring fencing. And we've made it easy for our customers. We're quite a bit in healthcare, retail, and of course, doing a little bit of work with the DoD as well. And so you can see some of our customers over here. So our approach is threefold. We first help you visualize your environment. We help you harden it. And then once you do have a breach, right, the whole concept of zero trust that we started off with is that assume a breach will give you techniques and tools to contain it and basically disrupt the cyber attack. So, and yeah, feel free to ask any questions, either during the demo or after. Thanks, Peter.
All right. So with AppGate and Color Tokens, what we're able to do is we're able to take these two cutting edge solutions where they have a very robust data set of information about the resources that they provide. And they kind of fit, they're kind of like two ends of the puzzle for securing an entire network end to end. There's the component where the users actually need to get access to the resources. And then there's the individual resources who themselves have reliance on other backend services. Think of a LAMP stack where there's going to be a front end, an application server, and then a database server. And being able to have a holistic solution whenever you combine AppGate and Color Tokens together, where it is truly end-to-end and secured and zero trust network access. So at first, we're going to actually start from the data center point of view, and we're going to talk a little bit about the microsegmentation component and what that brings you. So Venki, I'll turn it over to you.
So So as most of you know, microsegmentation addresses the, I guess, the gaps that you have in the core network, right, within the data center, and specifically lateral movement. And microsegmentation is really great at restricting lateral movement, and it does it using two ways, right? One is reducing the attack surface so that the bad actors can't get in. And the second thing is, if they do get in, then you want to limit where they can go, so reducing the blast radius. Now, this is great in theory and I guess in practice as well. But the problem is the moment you start adding remote access and you have a conventional VPN solution, like a VPN gateway or a concentrator, then the challenge is that it's extremely hard to ensure that people have access only to the systems that they need. So generally, what you see is you come into the VPN and you're kind of allowed onto the network. And Peter will go into more detail about this, but VPN was never really intended as a security solution, right? It was a way to, it was a convenience tool, a way to get you onto the network. So what that does is it somewhat defeats the purpose of microsegmentation. I'm not saying that it completely eliminates the benefits, but this is a gap, and this is kind of where we've been working with AppKit to address this gap. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. So back to what makes these two solutions work very well together, being able to provide microsegmentation between all of your workflows. If you were to think about doing that the old-fashioned way, where you would go on each individual resource and configure each workstation's or each VM's firewall rules, that gets very complicated and just it's almost impossible to manage. So in order to do so, color tokens, they actually abstract that away and they bring in this concept of tags and labels. And it's really using metadata and using that to organize and determine what the policy is that needs to get enforced between your workloads. And that's wonderful and all, but because it's abstracted away, you kind of lose the network component where you would be able to plug it into a traditional firewall and say, okay, now I need access to these services on these ports on these IP addresses. And what AppGate brings to the table here is this concept of a resolver where we are metadata aware and we can use the metadata in the same form that it's used to create policy and color tokens to actually define policy in AppGate. For example, I can say that I need access to all of the web applications in AWS that are currently in production, whereas a systems administrator might just need access to all of the Linux servers, and the Windows administrator might just need access to all the Windows servers. In an AppGate, it's going to be as simple as just saying, hey, I'm going to create a port on 3389, for example, for the Windows guy. I'm going to create a port and I'm going to put my resource that I need access to as the tag of Windows. And through the use of API calls on the back end and just a dynamic integration and being updated in real time, the policy that the end user actually gets and has access to is exactly what they need and no more and no less. And it updates in real time too. So that works really well if there is actually some scalable infrastructure there too. So what you see here is kind of that concept just broken out into a diagram where we have our virtual machine that we do in fact have access to, and then we have some other virtual machines that we don't have access to. And then this brings me to this next slide where we show these two solutions actually together and introduce that policy sync where the metadata that color tokens uses to define policy is now also used in AppGate to define policy too. So Venki, I don't know if you have any comments on here, but.
Yeah, so I think just the one thing to add, neither of us are sales guys here. So in case you're wondering, is there a discount if you buy the both? Obviously you'll have to talk to system integrators, but the value that you get is because of the policy sync, it reduces the operational burden on you. So for example, let's say that you started with microsegmentation first, right? And there's really no hard and fast rule on which one you do first, but let's say you started with that first, you define your applications, you created your zones and so on. Then when you introduce AppGate STP into the mix, AppGate starts pulling in all of this metadata that Peter mentioned, and then suddenly you start to see the same familiar applications that you've already dealt with during your microsegmentation journey, and they just show up there. So maybe you have your HR application or your ERP or your CRM, all of these just start showing up even without you having to do a discovery cycle on the ZTNA side of things. So that's really the value that we bring, is because of this bidirectional policy sync. And likewise, what we do on the color token side is to ensure that people can't just come in willy-nilly. We basically put the AppKit SDP gateways in the allow list. So incoming traffic is only allowed from the AppKit gateway, right? So that's how we ensure both sides that while AppKit is handling your front end, on the back end, we ensure that traffic can only come in through the AppKit gateway. Yeah, go ahead, Peter. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. So now we're actually going to be jumping into the live demo. And before we really go over to me sharing some virtual machines that I've spun up, I want to talk about what we are going to be showing from AppGate, at least. And at the very beginning, I mentioned that AppGate is identity centric, and it's also context aware, not just about the user, but also about the machine. So throughout this demo, we're going to see essentially the same machine that different users are going to be logging in. And because of the attributes that they have in this case, the identity provider that the organization uses, we're actually able to take that, and we can be smart about the identity attributes and use that to start to define policy. So I'm going to go to this screen, and I'm going to first start the demo off as a HR employee. And to do my job at this organization, I need to be able to get access to the payroll management. I need to make sure the employees here are paid. And I also need access to some of the corporate portals as well, so I can make sure that my information is up to date. I can get my W-2 information, for example. So I only need access to those things. I don't need access to the entire /24 of 253 or 5 IP addresses. And that's exactly what AppGate is going to allow us to do here. So this is a virtual machine I've spun up. And if I can find my mouse, I would be happy to showcase access here. There it is. Okay, sorry about that. Oh no, my mouse is not cooperating today. Let's get this out of a full screen. Sorry about that. There we go. Hey, Venki, do you mind jumping into yours while I try to figure out my mouse issue right now?
Okay.
I apologize about that, guys.
No worries. Yeah. This always happens. Murphy's Law, right? Oh God, and
the demo overlords were not smiling on us today.
yeah, no problem. Okay, so I am going to zoom forward. Oh, I guess it hasn't started to share yet. Sorry. All right. So, okay. So while Peter's handling the mouse issue, what I can do, Peter, for the benefit is just kind of I'm going to go through the scenarios so that when we are done, you can come back and show them. So what
Perfect.
Peter's going to show you is that as an HR user, right, you only need access to HR systems, right? Maybe the HR applications, the corporate portal, and things of that sort. So basically, what you're going to see is when you're logging in as an HR user, in fact, these are the only icons that you're only going to see. In fact, you're not even going to be able to launch other applications. Now, of course, if you're technically inclined, you could open a browser, punch in a IP address and so on, and try to get to maybe the CRM application, but that will be blocked by AppKit. So that's one example we're going to show you. And then we'll switch to a different persona. So in this case, it's a sales user. Now, the sales user will again need the HR application for applying for PTO, things of that sort. But then their primary applications are going to be maybe their CRM tool, their ERP tool, and so on. And you'll see that when the sales user logs in, they get a slightly different view, right? They get more applications. Now, when it comes to sysadmins, right, they have a lot different needs, right? There, it's all about managing systems, troubleshooting, keeping things secure, compliant, and so on. And if it's a Linux environment, they will generally do 90% of their work over SSH. And if it's Windows, I guess 90% of their work over RDP. It is unlikely that they will need access to the website, the web portion of these apps. So in theory, you could even not even give them access to the web, right? And that's one of the things that Peter will show you. And the other thing also is that one of the things ZTNA AppGate does, I should say, is that it can ensure that you get access only if your device has the appropriate posture. Right? And this is critical for sysadmin people because you want to make sure that if their system is compromised, then they don't get unnecessary access. And there are a number of things that AppGate can do to determine the posture. So what I'll do though, so he's going to show you an example where the posture is bad. So Peter's playing the bad cop. I'm going to play the good cop for a second, and I'll show you the situation where the sysadmin actually has a proper machine and can basically, connect to SSH and so on. So with that, I'm going to jump over to my Windows machine here, which is similar to what Peter was showing you. I'm the sysadmin here, and I'm going to be able to, use these buttons and pull up SSH sessions. So you can see, I apologize if the screen is a little, faint, but I'm now on the CRM web server. Maybe I want to do some management. I can switch directories. I have a full-blown SSH session. Now here comes the tricky part, right? AppGate will ensure that if I'm not running the firewall on this machine or I don't have AV, which Peter will be able to show you, then it can prevent access to these shells. But then the attackers are also one step ahead, right? And there's a technique called living off the land. I'm sure you're familiar with it. So what if they use existing tools? And some of these are as trivial as just being able to do network connections outbound from this machine. Then is it possible that an attacker can kind of take over this machine in a way remotely and then use the approved channel that AppGate has to get into the data center, right? That's actually possible. In fact, this technique is often called pivoting, sometimes referred to as VPN pivoting if the malware on this machine is actually tunneling out to the command and control center using a VPN. So some people kind of use that phrase as well. Now, that's kind of what I've done here, right? So this machine, this sysadmin's machine has been compromised with malware. It's not doing any ransomware attack or anything, which is why it's staying under the radar of your EDR and, I have Defender running here and so on. Not doing anything nefarious. All that it's doing is setting up an outbound connection on 443. So even my perimeter firewalls or my CASBs, they're happy, right? It's just 443, right? No biggie. Now, what's happening behind the scenes is, so this malware that's running here has actually established a remote connection to my command and control center running Kali. Now, specifically here, I'm actually using, if I can get my mouse to work here, so I'm using Metasploit. Because it gives me a really stable reverse shell. And so what I've done is I'm running Metasploit. So now that Windows box that you just saw has established a reverse connection into my Metasploit server. And then I can go a step further and basically, through some of the tricks that Metasploit has, I can make that admin machine that we just saw basically appear as a local machine using port forwarding. So this last command that you can see here, if it's visible, basically what I'm doing is I'm just saying that SSH port on that machine, just map it to my local machine. So all I need to do now is, in order to start connecting to any remote machine, is if I can get the Zoom window out here, I'll get another terminal. And what I can do now is I can just start establishing connections as if I'm on my local machine. So you can see I'm just making an SSH connection to Ubuntu at localhost, but note that it's port 2222. And this port is basically being pivoted through that Windows machine to go into the CRM web server that I was showing you. So let's go ahead and give it a shout and see what happens. So you can see that I'm now in, right? So on my Kali box, I'm now into the data center. I'm riding along the approved channel that sysadmin already has, right? So I didn't have to break in and do any credential sniffing or any of that sort. Now here, what I'm going to do is, typically as an attacker, what I'm going to do is probably just do a quick IP address check to see where I am. And then I see that I'm on 10.0.20, 10.0.10, 20.6. And so I'm going to do a low and slow scan. I don't want to like trigger any alarm bells. So what I'll do is I'll do an Nmap scan on /26. I'm not trying to go anything beyond that. And I'm just going to look for port 22 because I really don't want to spend a lot of time trying to figure out all your ports and do things. I just want to see, can I start jumping easily using the PEM file that I stole from that sysadmin's machine? I want to just see where can I go, right? So this is a very common thing that attackers do. So you can see that it scanned 64 IPs and I found 20 hosts, right? Now, as an attacker, this is golden, right? There are 20 hosts that have SSH running. I've got a key that I stole from that sysadmin's PC, and I can start going at it. Now, this is where microsegmentation kicks in, right? So what I'm going to do now is switch over to the X Shield console. And like I said before, the way we perform our journey is we help you visualize your environment, and then we'll start to harden it. And then, of course, when a breach does occur, we'll give you steps to basically start isolating and containing the point of breach. Now, we have been operating in the US West zone. So what I can do here is just so that you don't have to see everything under the sun here, I'm going to just set the location to be US West. And we'll start to kind of drill down here. And let's go one level below. We'll look at our US West environment. So you can see I've got different environments here, production, tests, and so on. Now, specifically, we were actually going to the production CRM server. So let's zero in on that one here. And we'll kind of go into the applications and also note that we were going into CRM, right? So this is probably what we really want to see. And I was going into the web server. Now, I'm doing this because I know the environment. In real life, what would happen is you'd basically get an alert saying, hey, something from the CRM web server is attempting lateral movement. You may want to go check it out. And then you will get the visualizer straight here. In this example, I'm kind of walking you through this. Now, let's expand the internet. And one of the things I did tell you in the beginning was that we allow list access from the AppGate gateway, right? So this is the AppGate gateway. And so you can see here that here's this connection. This is the SSH connection, if it'll pull this up, that sysadmin was doing. So as an attacker, what I was doing was I was just riding on top of this, right? So basically, it's hard for you to figure out, okay, what could be happening here? Because after all, I'm not a bad actor coming in directly. I'm riding on top of the sysadmin's account. So this is where microsegmentation really plays an impact, because what I can do is I can ensure that, I mean, I have access to this box, right? You just saw that. But can I now prevent you from scanning all of these other systems, finding SSH there, and then moving laterally, right? That's really what we are all about. And typically, the way we do this is that now a lot of people think of microsegmentation as application ring fencing. Now, that is a very complex and tedious affair when you start doing least privilege. What we want to do is we want to stop the most common attack vectors. So what I may want to do is I might say, okay, you know what? Let's look at US West production as an entirety, do some quick common sense policies that block SSH, RDP, and so on unnecessarily between each other, and just enforce that policy, and that will give us 80% of the security we need with just about 20% of the effort. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then hopefully by then, Peter's got his mouse.
Yep, I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay.
I got something figured out. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the US West production thing over here. And there's only 12 assets, not a very big environment. And I'm going to go ahead and basically say secure everything. We have already attacked this box, right? So no point worrying about the attack surface for this demo. So let's make sure that the guy can't go beyond, right? Blast radius will eliminate the blast radius. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy these policies. Now, again, we do warn you that you are enforcing policies and so on. And this will just take a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, what we can do is we can go back over to Peter's setup. All right, all yours, Peter.
All right. I appreciate everyone's understanding and patience with that. I'm going to be sharing my screen and right back to where I had left off whenever my computer wanted to stop working. So I am going to be acting as the HR worker here, and I need access to certain things to do my job. and I really only need access to these things. People in other roles at the company all obviously have different types of access that they need. So AppGate's really and is designed to enforce policy that really reflects that. And in order to do so, instead of having virtual machines that I'm logging into, I'm just going to log into my client on my workstation here. So I'm going to be logging in as an HR worker. And as that logs in, the ability to use the tags and labels that are available in other solutions like color tokens is pretty incredible, because if we think about a kind of a cloud and native infrastructure where containers and virtual machines are going to be spun up all the time, you can tag those machines with metadata, and then the moment they come up, you can get access and you can control and granularly control access to those resources. So I'm logged in here and I need access to these two things. I need access to the corporate portal, and I'm going to need access to our HR management solution. So if I just click on these, I'm able to get to our corporate portal here, and I'm also able to open up my human resources tools. So very quickly, I'm going to switch users just by logging out of AppGate. And I'm going to now switch my screen here. Did that switch screens, or is it still showing my other desktop?
No, we're back at the slides now.
Okay, perfect. So now I'm actually going to be logging in as one of these sales workers who has a completely different set of things that they need access to. Some of them are the same, but some of them are very different, like the customer relationship management tool. That's something that salespeople engage with very frequently, and it's a very high value asset for a lot of organizations. So it would make sense to enforce some very granular policies on that. So now I'm going to log in as the sales worker. And then after this, I think we have just the systems administrator piece of the demo. And that is really where Venki had kind of jumped in and where he handed it off. So hopefully we're able to kind of paint you the big picture, even though we did not do it as chronologically as we anticipated. So now I'm logged in as a salesperson, and just like the HR worker, I have access to that corporate portal. I also have access to the HR portal, and I have access to the customer management solution as well. Well, it's not working right now, but getting a 503 means that the server is up and running. It just made a mistake on 503. So with that out of the way, I'm then going to switch over to the systems administrator demo. Now, the story that I wanted to make sure that we get told here is that the systems administrator have massive rights within the organization. They can essentially DOS an organization. So it would make sense to enforce some stricter policies and actually take advantage of AppGate's device compliance checking to make sure that certain security baselines are met before access is actually granted. And one of those baselines we're going to be showcasing here. Very simple. We are going to take a look at my device and see if I am in fact running a firewall. And if I am not running a firewall, I'm not going to have access to these resources. And as the AppGate client logs in, we'll see that what we see here is completely different than what the other workers had seen. And what Venki had shown, where he was able to log in as a systems administrator. Or Venki, did you not get to that part yet? I apologize.
Yeah, no, I did do that. But actually, after you do this, I can go back to that just to, show that portion again.
Yeah, please do. And I could try clicking on it, but it's just going to say, hey, you're blocked. You don't have the compliance piece ready, so you don't have access to this. You're going to have to turn your firewall on. And in fact, I could actually go through my system settings and do that, but it's going to be a lot easier just to turn it over to Venki, who has his firewall turned on purpose for this exact reason. So Venki?
Yeah. So kind of just going back to where we were here. So this is the same user logged in. Of course, it's a different laptop. And in this case, I do have the Windows Defender firewall turned on. So I'm actually able to, I don't see those little minus signs that you saw on Peter's screen. And then I can actually connect to any of these systems. So as we did before, right? So this kind of shows you the example of where AppGate can actually use the device posture also, right? It is doing some risk analysis to determine whether you should be given access because, as Peter mentioned, tools like or protocols like SSH and RDP, I mean, they do give you, pretty unrestricted access to the system. So you want to ensure that access to that is safeguarded and you're constantly looking at risk.
Yep, thank you. So that actually gets us pretty close to the end of what we had in store for you guys. I see some questions had come in. Venki, you already ran through this, right? You don't want me to pause on these slides?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, were you all able to see what I was just sharing? I forgot if I was sharing the screen when I did it. Did I?
I don't think we'll be able to hear them.
Okay.
A few
So-
questions that came in, Venki,
Okay.
related to the presentation. Pramad is asking, what is the key differentiator as compared with VPN with ZTNA component available with firewall and ends client where all posture check is being done before getting the access for application? Also, the user will be able to access applications allowed for them.
I think I can handle that one, or I can at least answer part of it. One of the biggest differentiators that AppGate brings to the table is the continuous authorization model that comes in the form of our policies, entitlements, and conditions, where we can continuously evaluate and make sure that not just at session initiation, which is where most tools, I would say, actually make that determination. It's something that gets continuously evaluated. Say you log in the morning and you're not a disgruntled employee, but something happens during the day. Towards the end of it, AppGate is one of the few tools out there that has the data awareness to react and make real-time data actionable and have that get reflected in real time in your policies. The other piece of your question was about the access applications that are allowed for them. I'm assuming that's more of a making sure that the end user experience is very good and being able to kind of automatically onboard existing resources and maybe even do some device, what's the word I'm looking for? Device inspection to automatically discover workload discovery. There it is. To do some workload discovery. And AppGate does in fact have that capability. You're able to put it into your environment and it will kind of monitor, and then it will come back with a report saying, hey, we noticed that these are the most popular applications that people have accessed. But it'll go a step further. And in fact, it'll say, these people access these applications and they all happen to be in this group. Is this the group that you want to assign and start to use as the condition for further refined access to this resource?
Yeah. I think the other part of the question was, I think he was maybe referencing some VPN vendors that claim to have ZTNA capabilities. And I think, as you mentioned, you have some differentiators. The other thing I'd like to just add here is the integration that we bring. So because on the color token side, we can segment pretty much anything, right? Data center VMs, we also do Kubernetes, we do IoT devices, OT devices, legacy systems, and so on. So it doesn't really matter what it is. So in all of these cases, we exchange metadata with AppGate. So if you were to use AppGate to give you pinpoint access to, say, an OT jump box, right, that just works out of the gate. Because if you're using color tokens to manage those OT jump boxes, then we will export that as metadata that AppGate discovers, and now you get very, very secure access to just that system and nothing else. So I think maybe my final statement here is that AppGate is a first-class ZTNA solution. It didn't come as a VPN with stuff bolted on. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, Peter, but that's the way I look at AppGate, right? You're a first-class ZTNA solution.
Yeah, so we really stayed high level with what AppGate brings to the table. There's also single packet authorization, which is a form of port knocking, and it essentially cloaks the infrastructure. If you look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, step number one is reconnaissance. And if the bad guy can't even determine that this is the IP address that your resources are at, they're not going to waste their time and resources attacking it. So it mitigates a lot of threats just right out of the gate. And then there's just a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, thank you, Venki.
There was another question that came in. You showed enforcement of policy on the color tokens console, but we didn't get to see how this would disrupt the attacker. Could you show us what would happen?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So let me switch. I'll make sure that I actually share this time. Okay. Yeah, looks like it's sharing. All right. Yeah. So there's actually two aspects to this, right? So the first thing is we did talk about reducing the blast radius. So I'm going to go ahead and just try the scan again and see what happens. Yeah, so this is the exact same command that I just ran a few minutes ago. Now what's happening is that it only discovered itself, right? It says, yeah, I can talk to myself on SSH. I've got a port open, but I can't reach anything else. So you see, we had 20 hosts that we were scanning up before. Now all I'm seeing is myself, right? So what we have shown you here is we have kind of reduced the blast radius. We have kind of contained the damage, right? So think of this bomb going off, but it's now just confined there. Now we actually go a step further though, right? Now, remember that the connection from the AppGate or the user to the AppGate STP is still up, right? That's where the bad guy was kind of running in. Now, what we also can do is within the color tokens framework, right? So we will generate an alert anytime we see this attempt happening. And we work with a variety of SIM SOAR solutions. So the SOAR would know right away that something has happened. And then if AppGate's also plugged into the SOAR framework, and then what you can do is you can run a playbook on the SOAR that says either this machine, this user or this machine appears to be compromised, or you might also say, you know what, let's just revoke all sysadmin access out of an abundance of caution. And then what AppGate can do at that point is basically remove access, and it will also remove ongoing access. So in a situation like that, my reverse tunnel that I'm so proud of here is also just basically going to be disrupted. So we have actually two ways that the joint solution can help defend your network. Hopefully that answers the question.
Hey, Venki,
Thank
I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
Well, I have a comment and then a question. One of my favorite things about color tokens is just how pragmatic of a solution it is. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, and color tokens absolutely reduces any blast radius that a breach would have. And so then my question for you, which is unrelated to my previous comment, is so you're very aware of all of the resources that are in an organization. Is there I don't want to say a compliance checker, but is there like an inventory that, say, a new CVE comes out for the next log4j? That's
Yeah.
something that you would know about, and you'd be able to quickly quarantine and understand what your risk posture is within a couple of minutes, frankly. Is that something that you guys have?
Yeah, we do actually. In fact, maybe I'll share again for a second. Yeah. So one of the things that we can do is, so when I was showing you the segments that we created, I kind of went into a specific one that said US West production, which was over here. But what I can also do is I can actually create a segment. So let's say something like log4j or the next big version came along. I can say that, look, I have, so the first thing you can do is you can search for the assets by CVE. So for example, what I can do is and I'm sure even your vulnerability management solutions will let you do it. But the advantage here is that now I can actually start cordoning these things off as well. So one of the criteria I can do while searching for this is I can search for a CVE ID. So let's say I'll just pull something from 2019. Interestingly, just today the Verizon DBR report came out, and they said that people are still looking at old CVEs, right? So that kind of shows you why this patching is so important as well. So here's a list of all the assets that I have that match this, that have the CVE. Now, what I can do is I can say, let's create a microsegment around these and then figure out what we want to do. Maybe we just isolate them completely, right? So no traffic in or out until we patch them. Or we can have policies that say, okay, let's just allow 443 to some servers and not to others. You can figure out the policy you want. But the idea is that I can now create segments based on the CVE. So I can, within this criteria here, I have some mouse trouble as well. I can basically start assigning a tag to that CVE, and then I can, start creating these segments. So that there is value in using microsegmentation for that. And of course, we make it easy with X Shield, which is our product.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I think we have another question that came in.
Yes, someone submitted another question here for the color tokens visualizer looks interesting. What do your customers typically use it for?
Yeah, it's interesting. It actually kind of ended up with a life of its own. In the beginning, we focused on it really being a visualization tool to help you identify your traffic flows for microsegmenting. And then we started to find that our customers say, oh, this is interesting. I never had such a nice visual representation of my network. Can I use it to find misconfigurations in my network, right? So I said, okay, we can help you figure out if you have incoming RDP traffic from the network. So you can start putting filters. Like I can say, okay, let's filter for ports, and I want to see. Sorry, the zoom control is right here. Okay, so I want to see maybe TCP, and I want to look at 22, and let's include this, and let's also add. Oops, I want to add 3389 as well here. So I want to look at these sensitive protocols. And then I can start to see, so if, for example, you started seeing lines over here, then you know that you're in a bit of trouble because something in your perimeter firewall is letting these things in. So we have basic configuration checking is one. We've also had our customers actually are the ones that have really found interesting use cases. Like we had one customer that decided to say, okay, I always suspected, but my systems were going to the wrong domain controllers. With your tool, like I want to do something, and then 2 days later he said, aha, I found that my servers in California were going to the domain controller in China. I could never show my boss, but now I have your visualizer to prove it, right? So it's been interesting. We are seeing a lot of use cases outside of this, and of course, we also represent AppGate, right? So we have so this is our digital twin of the AppGate gateway. So we can also see where are your VPN users going. So for example, if you haven't created a policy yet for a certain application, and we see that there's a line from AppGate going to that thing and it's colored red because we don't have any information about it, that gives you a cue that, okay, maybe you go into your AppGate console and pull up this application and create a policy. So it's really a tool to help you visually. Some people are just very visual by nature, right? So they want to see and act visually. And because you can filter everything, right, you're never, I mean, I kind of like to show this just because, um, you know, most environments look like this. It's just so noisy, but you never have to see a view like this, right? You're always going to filter and scope and look at it in a certain hierarchical fashion. So kind of took a life of its own, actually. I guess long story short.
Impressive, yes. We're running out of time, but do we have time for one last question?
Sure.
It says here, what else does your integration provide? I think you kind of covered a little bit of it, but I'm not sure if maybe we can have some closing remarks with this last question.
So right now we are just only looking at the tags and labels surrounding the workloads. But one of the things that I kind of envision in the future, and something I would have loved to get shown today, is that CVE, or that kind of identified vulnerable server, and having that automatically get quarantined in AppGate. Right now, we're just using it to provide access and just granular access to a very specific set of solutions. But I'd like to kind of flip that narrative on its head and say, okay, now we need to cut off access to a certain set of solutions. So that's something that I definitely know is possible. It's just we didn't get to it today. But the sky's kind of the limit. AppGate's extraordinarily extensible. It's essentially a data engine that happens to enforce network tools, network rules, and the policy engine is very extensible, where you can come up with, you can essentially code what you want your policy to be with AppGate. And with that, you're able to actually reach out to these third-party tools, such as color tokens, or maybe a SIM tool you want to run a query, and bring all of this data in, and then you can make as knowledgeable of an assessment as you possibly can about whether or not something should happen in your environment or not, or what you need to provide access to or not.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with the SOAR in the mix, or maybe there's a better term these days, just orchestration. I think there's a lot of things you can do. I gave you the example of, if we detect lateral movement and we know that it's coming from, AppGate knows more of the context, right? We just know it's somebody's kind of coming in and doing some mischief. Um, so AppGate can obviously, either just remove the specific connection or block all sysadmins for a period of time. But you could also kind of, flip it on its head and basically say that, let's say that, normally AppGate was allowing, or rather from the color token side, we were allowing web, we were allowing SSH and so on. And now because we have detected this thing, we don't want to cut off everything, right? We don't want to maybe remove all access. So we could then send a signal over to the SOAR, or the SOAR could tell AppGate that allow 443 because, we want the application on user to continue to work, but just, disconnect 22, right? So all of these scenarios you can now do because we are both programmable platforms. So if you have some kind of low code, no code SOAR, then you can create all these interesting playbooks. Where of course you have a human at the wheel, but you can do a lot of these things where you can do automatic remediation and breach containment on the fly.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to our special guest, Venki from Color Tokens, and to Peter for this very insightful session.
Thank you, Venki.
To our audience, thank you for being part of today's ZTNA Table Talk. As a friendly reminder, the recording of today's session will be shared with you tomorrow. We highly value your feedback, so please take a moment to complete the short survey at the end of this webinar. Your input is instrumental in shaping the future of our ZTNA Table Talks. Thank you once again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.